Over the years, the pickup truck has gone from being a practical, utility-based vehicle to becoming one that is a lifestyle vehicle, if not a full-fledged status symbol, that can perform practical functions, but when push comes to shove, isn't exactly the most practical car on the road. In the 1970s, pickup trucks truly were designed with function in mind. While these cars were technically classified as small to mid-sized vehicles, they packed a punch when it came to utility. With a large bed and small cab, these smaller trucks truly were purpose-built. But over the years, this has really shifted, and pickup trucks have shifted away from their function-based roots. For example, let's take a look at size. The first generation of F-150 was 36% cab and 64% bed. In 2021, that ratio flipped to 63% cab and 37% bed. But it's not just the size of the cab and the bed that has changed. The weight has changed as well. In fact, since the 1990s, the average pickup truck has added about 1,300 pounds to the car. That comes out to about a 32% increase. Trucks have also gotten longer, with the first generation F-150 having a 114-inch wheelbase and the current generation having a wheelbase of 145.4 inches. And this doesn't even begin to address the pricing issue, with modern-day fully loaded pickup trucks sometimes exceeding $100,000 in order to buy. The fact is, more than almost every other car on the road, in fact, I would argue more than any other car on the road, the pickup truck has changed the most in appearance, functionality, and price. And while I am not making this video today to discuss what type of truck is best or whether or not size actually does matter, what I do want to discuss is how we got to where we are today, and how trucks have gotten to be so damn big. So let's get started. The pickup truck transition has been fairly slow moving, so unless you have a direct comparison to an older pickup truck compared to a newer one, it's actually easy to forget or not even realize how much trucks have changed over the years. Fortunately for me though, I am reminded of this nearly every single day because my husband daily drives a 1996 Ford Ranger that's lowered. And while my husband's 1996 Ford Ranger is a bit of an extreme example because to many people the Ford Ranger is considered to be a mini truck, this is even still noticeable with older trucks as well. For example, my dad drives a 2006 Toyota Tundra, and even whenever you look at his Tundra compared to a 2023 model, the difference is quite noticeable. The fact is, trucks have gotten larger, and there's actually a number of really interesting reasons as to why. First is the transition of the truck from a utility vehicle to a family one. You see, I mentioned earlier that the truck was really function-based. It was made to haul things, tow things, and complete work. It certainly wasn't designed to transport your wife or your kids. That was until the crew cab was introduced. But in the 1950s, the first crew cab, so the four-door variation of a pickup truck, was introduced by International Harvester. This was the first six-passenger truck, but it wasn't until about 30 years later in the 90s where the crew cab started gaining popularity, and that's when people started buying trucks as their primary vehicle. Which makes a ton of sense, because why would somebody buy a pickup truck and a normal everyday car where they could get the functionality of both through a modern-day crew cab truck? And thus, this was really whenever trucks became not only widely adopted, but really embraced. Because of this, around this time is whenever trucks started adopting many of the fads and features that normal everyday cars had. They really pivoted from being a functionality-based vehicle to a luxury, family, or comfort-based one. Through the process of becoming a more comfort vehicle, trucks started adopting things like larger seats, larger center consoles, infotainment. Truck manufacturers started adopting the trends and applying them to their trucks because people wanted the best of both worlds. And in the 90s and early 2000s, this trend started to take shape with features like leather seats, automatic locks and windows, things like that. But today, it's really transformed into an even more luxurious segment of vehicle with hands-free driving, suede interior, and even massage seats in some cases. And while this may explain why the truck has become more luxurious than ever, it doesn't really explain why the truck has become so huge. Physically huge, not metaphorically. And this really comes down to three things: emission standards, tax incentives, and very clever and effective marketing. But let's talk about the emissions first. During the Obama administration, regulation was implemented to enact new fuel economy and emission standards. And according to the White House website, these new standards would cover cars and light trucks for model years 2017 to 2025, requiring performance equivalent to 54.5 miles per gallon in 2025, while reducing greenhouse gas emissions to 163 grams per mile. And the important phrase that I want to highlight here is cars and light trucks, because under this, at the time, new regulation, cars and light trucks were under much stricter regulation whenever it came to emissions compared to larger footprint vehicles. Now, there is a lot of information about what goes into emission regulation. For example, per the EPA, vehicles have to be categorized into different bins, which you can see here. These are different bins based on methane levels, particle pollution, and even formaldehyde levels. And truthfully, I am nowhere near smart enough to understand how these different components come together in order to affect emissions, gas, and pollution. And so I'm not even going to try to explain it for this video. But the important thing that you need to know for the context of this video is that the larger the vehicle is, the less strict the emission rules were for that vehicle. The point is, at least in relation to this video, is that as cars got bigger, they could in theory release more emissions, or at the very least not be held to the same regulatory standards as smaller cars. Vehicle footprint is measured as the area between the points where the wheels touch the ground, and so as this area becomes larger, your emission standards become lower and more flexible. And because automakers were making these cars larger, they now didn't have to meet the same emission regulation, and as a result, cars that maybe wouldn't have been able to pass emission standards were able to pass even though no changes were made to their emissions at all. The only difference was the actual size of the car. And this worked. For example, in recent years, the newest generation of Cadillac Escalade became about 7 inches longer, and according to experts, this allows for about 2 to 3% more carbon dioxide emissions as a result. And because of all of this, you are seeing more and more of these XL SUVs, these extremely large trucks, because automakers are kind of rewarded for making their cars bigger. And while over the years there has been a lot of discussions about potentially implementing new emission regulation on these XL SUVs and trucks, as of right now, there hasn't been anything that has been set in stone by either government officials or the EPA. So the transition of the truck from a work car to a family car really opened up the floodgates of all of the potential that a truck could offer. Emission standards and regulations really incentivized automakers to make their trucks bigger, but it was Section 179 of the IRS tax code that really incentivized buyers to buy these trucks. Section 179 of the U.S. Internal Revenue Code is an immediate expense deduction that business owners can take for purchases of depreciable business equipment instead of capitalizing and depreciating the asset over a period of time. And through Section 179, a business owner or entrepreneur can buy a truck or an SUV that has a gross vehicle weight of 6,000 pounds or more. They could purchase that vehicle, and then they could deduct the full purchase price of that car from their taxes and their taxable income, thus lowering their tax bill. This actually used to be 100%, so you could deduct 100% of the purchase price. It has recently been lowered to 80%, and it's going to continue to be lowered in the coming years. So business owners, particularly high-income earning ones, have a huge incentive to buy these large pickup trucks and XL SUVs because they can deduct the full purchase price of these cars from their taxes. And this is why you'll oftentimes see people buy these cars, and they'll buy them often because these same types of tax incentives simply aren't available to smaller cars. And this is one of the reasons why large SUVs and trucks in general have gained a lot of popularity. Because while emission standards and higher profit margin do incentivize automakers to make these cars, these tax incentives incentivize people to buy them. And a handful of the cars that qualify for the Section 179 deduction are Cadillac Escalade, Chevy Colorado, as well as a number of different Silverado models, Ford F-150s and larger, GMC Sierra 1500 through 3500, Yukons, Tahoes, as well as a slew of other vehicles. The fact is, Section 179 tax deduction has made a huge incentive for business owners to buy these larger cars. In fact, this is something that I've considered, and most likely I will be buying an XL SUV for this exact reason. Whether the US government likes it or not, they have created a real incentive for Americans to buy large trucks and SUVs. And so automakers keep making them. But truthfully, I think that the reason why trucks have become so physically large doesn't just come down to skirting emission regulation and lowering taxable income. I think it also comes down to clever marketing. I've talked about this a lot in many of my videos, but automakers have been transitioning to providing luxury vehicles rather than base model ones because luxury cars are simply higher margin. Dollar for dollar, automakers make more off of that fully loaded pickup truck versus that base model workhorse. And because of that, automakers have a real incentive to try to push that fully loaded, massive $100,000 SUV onto their customers. I mean, what do you see whenever you see a truck commercial? There is always an emphasis on size, ruggedness, durability, and the ability to tackle whatever may be in front of you. You can haul anything, tow anything, whatever you need to do, the truck can handle it. And yet, a 2019 study found that 1/3 of truck owners rarely or never haul things in the bed of their truck, while 2/3 rarely or never tow anything with their truck. The same study showed that when truck owners were asked to give their truck character traits, 40% of F-150 owners used the word powerful to describe their truck, and 50% of F-150 owners also use the word rugged. And basically what this study found was that image and personality was a huge factor whenever people were considering what type of car that they wanted to buy, even truck people. Automakers have done an excellent job of creating a marketing campaign to convince people that modern-day trucks are more rugged, more durable, and can conquer any challenge, and that bigger is better. And in turn, they've convinced you that you need all of these features out of your truck as well. And the emission regulation as well as the tax incentives are sort of just icing on the cake in my opinion. The reality is large trucks are more profitable, and as a result, automakers have a real incentive to convince you that the larger truck is the one that you want to buy. And I've seen a lot of arguments online stating that tax incentives and emissions are the only reason why trucks have become so large. And while I absolutely do think that this has played a factor, I ultimately think that this is really due to marketing. Because the reality is not only have trucks become so big, but automakers have successfully convinced people to buy these large trucks. And over the years, the automotive industry has transformed the modest workhorse vehicle into a modern luxury that, while capable, is truthfully too expensive to actually justify doing much with. And while over the years there has been a number of concerns brought up about the safety of large trucks, specifically those that are lifted, as well as the fact that large trucks aren't being held to the same emission standards as normal cars, I don't really see the reality of the current truck changing anytime soon. Because the truth is, Americans just love their large trucks too much. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.